My name is Forrest Gump. No. I am Al Taylor, assembly member, newest assembly member to the New York State Legislature. I am in the 71st Assembly District, where I replace Assemblyman Farrell. I am a country boy from North Carolina, but I grew up here in the city, and I'm proud to represent the area where I went to school, got in trouble, I live, I pastor a church. Thank you so much for coming out. I hope you enjoyed my interview. I grew up on 142nd Edgecombe. The building was 141 Edgecombe. Now you say, well, that doesn't mean anything to me, but 139 Edgecombe is where they filmed the movie Claudine with James Earl Jones, Diane Carroll, and as a young kid, 14, 15 years old, sitting on the fire escape and watching them film. It was like Hollywood has come to Harlem. That's like, what, 50 years, 40 years later, I still remember it. So it was quite an impression watching James Earl Jones, a young Lawrence Hilton Jacobs Jr., and he was there, Diane Carroll was there, and they were using a woman's apartment that was the babysitter for my young sister. So I knew the apartment, and the story is about someone that is on public assistance and they're trying to make it through life. And back then, they would send someone home to the home, like a home visit, to make sure you didn't have more than what you're supposed to have. Because if we didn't pay for it, you shouldn't have it. And the woman actually was a public assistant resident. So that was my, right there on Edgecombe. And my apartment, we could look straight down 142nd Street and you could see the 369th Armory, you could see the FDR Drive. I had a clear view, and I was a member of the How You Act Cadet Corps, which met at the Armory every Friday. So it was someplace to go. What was interesting was before you could get to the How You Act or to the 369th Armory, you had to pass Menacing. And now Menacing had a Cadet Corps as well. And the days that I went by myself, I always regretted. I was kind of like, oh man, I'm going to Cadet Corps by myself. Because I had a friend of mine that lived in Drew Hamilton, brother named Knox, Nelson Knox. If you're out there and you see this, man, come on, holler at your boy. So Nelson was a pretty nice sized guy. He looked like a man in terms of structure. And so I was more than glad to walk down the block with Nelson. But those days that Nelson wasn't going, I had to pass Menacing. And it's hard to run in combat boots. It's hard to get a good run in combat boots, but I can make it happen because I was inspired that if I let those cats from Menacing catch me, I'm gonna have a dirty uniform by the time I got where I was going. They weren't welcoming. You know, it's kind of like this I squad. They had the silver drill team metal. These guys looked like they were high polished. Everything was good. It was a bunch of them. And when you have two guys, they never want to bother us. But if it's one, they want to put you on the run. So Menacing, I got love for you, and we can still do business. But I just remember Menacing. Growing up there, I attended school at PS 123, right on the corner of 140th and 8th Avenue. I think that's Mahalia Jackson was the name of the school. I'm not sure what they call it today. Next door here, just to show you how great life is. And if you have a plan, tell it to God and watch him laugh. So I graduated from that school at 123, and I attended Frederick Douglass Academy, which is the old Frederick Douglass. They called it the Dime back then. Now it's what? It's FDA. And it's one of the greatest schools in the city. So at the time, it was an all boys class. I finished here and went to Brandeis. And I don't know if you know 140th. That was a hot block. As a kid, you could be traumatized. That's another block. You'd go in, it's between 7th and 8th, and the post office is in that block. And my moms would send me to get the mail if there was a package. And it was like an adventure movie, because I needed to make sure that I got in. Okay, you're in. No drama, no beef. Now you get the package. Now, do you go back the same way or do you go a different way? Because 140th was a hot block back in the day. I won't mention some of the names of the people. You may have heard them, but some of them are still there. It's a beautiful block now. But man, If you didn't live on 140th, you needed permission to be on that block. And going to the post office after school's over. And keep in mind, I used to have a lot of fights at 123. You talking about bullying? I know what bullying is. I'd get a swing and then I'm gone. If I couldn't get a swing, I was gone. You're gonna have to catch me. I fought, seems like every other day in that schoolyard or outside of the schoolyard. And as soon as I got home, my mother would say to me, I don't send you to school to fight. I send you to learn. And she's right. But I don't think those parents were instructing their children in the same manner that I was being instructed. So I would have ripped clothes, damaged stuff. It was a nightmare. And I think there's something to be said there when you trauma, and I'm gonna call it traumatizing, because you're living in the now, but parents and sometimes adults don't understand the world that these kids are in. And it's easy for me to look back and say I got through it, but in the moment of living it, it is literally hell. You are traumatized and you do anything that you think you need to do to survive. And or I can even see where people in their lives, because everything around them is hell in their world, in their context. You take a fifth grader and say, okay, oh, it's not that bad. You're not walking to school with that person. You're not in their world. Your worldview is different from them. And so I'm always cognizant. So there's so much. And I think that's my passion, to wanting to always champion for those that are marginalized or those that are victimized in, or most likely people want to dismiss them. And I'm like, hey, you know what? You do matter. It doesn't matter if you don't have the latest clothes, you don't have this. And back then, what we used to do, they call it snapping on people. So they snap on you if you didn't have this. And back then, the famous store was John's Bargain. So they was, oh, you shop at John's Bargain. Now everybody goes to the 99-cent store, which the John's Bargains was a 99-cent store, way ahead of its time, because you can get discounted stuff there. So I would say that as a young person, that type of experience impacts your self-esteem. So you either have to be the best ball player, the greatest football player, or have 15 brothers, or have 3 fine sisters, because you need something to negotiate with when the drama's coming down. And I was fortunate enough to get through that. I will never forget that part of my life. And as I grew into a teenager, a young teenager, my dad got me a job. My first job was on 125th Street. If you're walking east off the corner of 125th Street, there was a store right there. I want to say it was a Kentucky Fried Chicken or something. I can't remember. But right next to it was a woman's hosiery store. I was 15 when I worked there. Next to that was it was a record store, and that's where you bought all your tickets for concerts or something like that. Back then, the Audubon Ballroom did a lot of events, and you hear it. I mean, I grew up listening to Eddie O.J. on the radio. You know, this is Eddie O.J. in the morning. You know, he tell you what the colors are that you want to wear. I come up out of the, later on, you have the Frankie Crocker on BLS. So I'm Harlem through and through. You walk through Harlem this time of year or during the holidays, and the record stores were blaring Christmas songs. Trees are being sold. Everybody had lights. It seemed like a whole different culture from what it is right now. And I'm taking you back to the Edgecombe. I'm still 145th, 142nd. The Social Security office was on 145th Street at one time. The first 24-hour store was Blue Star, Blue something right here, 145th, 144th, and 8th Avenue. That store was a 24-hour before they didn't have plexiglass. You could just walk in and everything. I later learned he was doing some type of work that required him to pay taxes and other things, which carted him off to jail. But as a kid, you have all of these stores. You have the fish and chip spot was right here. There was one 142nd and 141st. Every neighborhood had a bar. Every corner there was a bar. I don't know if it was, when you think about the price of things today, you just wonder how people could afford to have a bar. But that was our social gathering. Whether it was, what's the place I'm looking at? It was on 145th and St. Nicholas. They had some, I think it was Patsy's or Patty's Bar right there. That's now a Dunkin' Donuts on that corner. Across the street, directly across, was the Bowery Bank, the Bowery building. You had Needix, or a 24-hour hot dog kind of place right there when you're going down toward Edgecombe. Just so much. I love Harlem. So back to working on 125th Street. I saw Red Fox on 125th Street. Stylistics. It was not uncommon to see people that were performing walk the streets in there. So I worked for this hosiery store, and it was good, but I got a little taste of some money. I was like, I need more money than that. I have a girlfriend now, and she want to go to the movies. So she said, well, we're giving you a fare the other night. And they were nice, but I was so gung-ho. That Christmas was the last time I worked for them. And what I ended up doing was, my dad introduced me. He was a waiter. He introduced me, and he was a waiter at Frank's restaurant, which became Charles Gallery at some point. He was a maitre d' over there. And so he knew some people. That's how I got the job in the first place. He knew those people that used to come in to have. And he said, I have a son. And so they gave me a job. I got my working papers. I'm ninth grade. And my dad later introduced me to a guy. I want to say his name was Lonnie. I can't remember. Lonnie was a kind of like, he didn't say much. He was a rough kind of guy. And he said, I'll give you this much an hour, and this sells for this. And anything over that, you keep. So at 9 years old, the street vendors were on 125th, and he was just outside of the door where I was working before. So I gave up working inside to work outside in the wintertime. So that's when they were selling the double knits. So if they were $5 or $10, whatever I got over that asking price was mine, plus he gave me. And then we pack all the stuff up in his car at the end of the evening. He'd take it down to one of the stores between 5th and Lenox and store it in there. And hey, I'm going home. That was Harlem for me. My Sundays, I would go to the Apollo. The Apollo couldn't have been that much, maybe $5, but whatever it was, I could afford it. I take the 8th Avenue bus straight down from 142nd, go over there. I'm hanging out. It's beautiful. You go in. Who was that? King Floyd? Suki. Hey, they're good looking. Al Green. When I saw Al Green, it wasn't Love and Happiness. It was, the album was, I was a buff. The album was Backup Train, and he was singing a rendition of The Temptations, Can't Get Next to You, but it was really slow. And Al Green, he totally did it. Whether it was the originals, Stylistics, oh man, they were there. A Sunday afternoon, bam. And if you had some extra money, you could go to the RKO right next to it. They're like a playland. And everybody has a picture somewhere today. There's a fake house in front. And you stand in front, and the photographer would take your picture, and he'd give you your picture for like $2 or $3. And you're standing in front of somebody's house with a porch. And it was a game room. And that's where the Lowe's 5 is, right next door. I think they're building a hotel right there. So 125th Street was home to me. I knew it. I could walk it. It's not what we see today. The Apollo was that place where you go in the back door and try to look to see if you see any artists. Gladys Knight and the Pips. I ran on stage one afternoon. Literally, I was mesmerized by Melba Moore. I was by myself. I had my ticket, and I didn't come with anybody. And this is probably not politically correct, but I was at least 15. I might have been 16, and I'm sitting there. And she did a set in place of Gladys Knight. And I'm sitting there, maybe second, third row. I'm like, she is just so beautiful. And I ran up. When she took her bow, I hit the stage. I mean, I ran up, I gave her a kiss on the cheek, and I was back in my seat before security knew what had happened. Never did anything like that in my life, but she was just, Melba. It started with Bruce Wright, the Honorable Judge Bruce Wright. Everything went well. I got over here to the school next door, worked hard. Then I failed my 7th grade class. And this is important. I failed in 7th grade, but halfway through repeating that, I was doing so well. I was on track. They put me in the 8th grade. My teacher back then in the 7th grade when I was repeating it was a teacher by the name of Mr. Lowe. They call him Bulldog Lowe. He had a bag. Anybody that's gone to the Dime or FDA or the Old Dub, they know Mr. Lowe. And he had a bag like a Ralph Cramden bus bag, and he had a paddle in there, and he called it Lucille. Now, I'm from down south. I know what they'll do with you if they tell you to do something and you don't do it. But I didn't know that they could paddle you in New York. They probably weren't supposed to, but that bag kept me on straight street, and I did all my work, made it to the 8th grade, graduated on time, went to Brandeis, and I made it to the 9th grade. And let me tell you, I've told you about being a kid that fought a lot, bullied a lot, picked on. I got to 9th grade and I ran across one of those guys, and I was in a place where I had to fight this guy. There was no way, I couldn't get to the other side of where I needed to go without going through this guy. Now I like to tell you, I leaned in a little bit and I did a little bit. For all I know, I could have been fighting like this. But at the end of that engagement, his nose was bloody and he didn't want any more of me. A police pulled me off of him in the middle of the street. When I say in the middle of the street, it was the corner 143rd and Lenox, just on the backside of Menacing. That was the day that my mama's son realized you don't have to run anymore. That mindset messed me up because now I'm walking around like this. What, you want some of this? What, you know, you can imagine. So I started catching up with life as I thought I was catching up and making bad choices. And I found myself standing in front of Judge Bruce Wright. And I had a job. I was working for the National Council of Negro Women, which was started by Dorothy Heights. And it was here in Washington Heights, I call it Harlem, 157th in Amsterdam, where they ran an after-school program. And my job was to set up the chairs, pull out the mats, clean everything up, and put it away when it was over. Those kids, you would recognize some of them from the movie with Michael Jackson and The Wiz. When the movie opens, they're in graffiti land. Dorothy lands on the Wiz, she's dead, and then the kids start flipping and doing all that stuff. Those kids that were doing the flips came out of that program, which was a product of what you can do when you invest in kids and get them off the streets during the day. So for me, my life took a change when I realized, when I was standing in front of Judge Bruce Wright, I didn't want to spend any more time in the tombs. I was afraid my mother was going to kill me. And she was so disappointed, she just said nothing. She got me home. She brought my boss with me. And those things made a difference standing in front of that judge. I was in school, had a job, and my mother was there. And it's the same thing today. We need to be visible, supporting our kids in the courtroom. So when a judge looks over there, who's standing with that individual? Because they want to give another chance in some instances. So for me, I know, and even what I do now, I know where I came from. So I'm always willing to whatever. And people say, well, you know, I don't care. I pastor a church. My whole life is about second chances. I have one, I had one, and people will quickly write you off. And I can't write you off because I could have been the guy that got wrote off. And I didn't start this journey. I want to be an elected official, not at all. So in school, I finish, I make it to the military because you can join the military without a high school diploma. I joined the military because everybody around me was dying. Somehow in my travels and my hard-headedness, I ended up smoking dust like people smoke cigarettes. So I'm sitting here to say that, yeah, I was a dust head, but God had a better plan for me. I joined the military. I was like, you know what? Someone's going to kill me because I don't want to do jail time. And my mother's not going to have the money to pay for the funeral. That's why I joined the military. I didn't join the military because, oh, you could see America and you could do it. I had no vision And the Bible says you'll perish without vision. And we have to write it and make it plain. I joined the military. What's the first thing I do? I become a military police officer. I don't have a high school diploma, but I have a badge and a 45 and a patrol car, and I'm there to enforce the laws that are generated by the military. I was like, are you kidding me? 19 years of age, I graduated boot camp. 4 weeks after that, I'm flying to Arizona. I'm a military police officer, and I'm in a town, in a city like I've never seen before in my life. And all I could think about is, wow, I got a gun. And nobody can believe this back home. And I realized that when I came home on a visit, there were some cats, you have brothers that you roll with, their kids, their brothers and sisters are younger. And they say, hey, look at me, I'm doing like, and I was like, man, that is so not cool. And I thought about what image did I leave for them that make them think that's cool. And I had to start cleaning that up. I went to college. I was in college doing some work. I wanted to be this superstar model. So I'm taking these classes off campus. I'm doing this. So I started doing fashion shows. Met my beautiful wife there. Hey, honey. So I'm doing all of this stuff. And someone comes over to me. He's part of student government. And he says, we would love to have you join student government in this capacity. I'm like, I don't even know what student government is, man. I'm trying to do my work. I'm working on this fashion show. And so what I have to do, because I don't have a lot of time. I said, we just need you. I later realized I was popular and they wanted me to be a part of that ticket to help. And then I got in, I learned what they did, and I was the entertainment programmer. So I was fortunate enough to start giving concerts. Lehman College is a 2,300 seat theater. Go check out that theater. It's second to none. And I got to see and talk to Melba Moore again, because they did Pearly. They filmed Pearly for HBO in that facility with the guy that played the butler. I can't remember his name. And Sherman Hensley, all right there in that school. So it's a phenomenal school. It's great. It's in the Bronx, but it's CUNY. And I was like, wow, life is good. And I had an opportunity to serve as an advisor for the Veterans Club, and I did that. I worked for vets and their families on campus as my work study. And the school offered me an internship with this office, with Assemblyman Farrell's office, and it was worth 4 credits, and it required once a month, once a week. So you're always looking for ways to enhance your schedule. So I took it, and I was like, okay. So I went to community boards. I like it. And I just felt these people with stuffed shirts. So I'm like, but I just want to get a good credit and have a reference on my resume and a good letter so I can get a good job. 30 years later, here I am, man. I'm here, and I took an internship in Albany worth 15 credits. I didn't have to go to class anymore, but we would meet every other week. And one thing led to another. I've always been the guy, if you go back to 5th grade, even when I wasn't good with my hands, I was fighting more times than not because I was advocating for people. Oh, you can't do that. I knew what was right. I want to champion for others. But you got to learn how to do this if you got to step up. But there's a different way to fight now. So I want to fight for all those that people have written off. I want to fight for people that haven't had an opportunity to have a second chance. So whether it's you and you became the parent for your siblings at an early age because your parent died, you never had life. You lived there. So maybe you want to go back to school, or you've gone to jail a few times and you never finished your education. Let's do those things, because if we don't begin to equip our children, and some of those that have made mistakes, we're going to get wiped out, period. Because this is a technology game, and if we're not at the table, our kids are not going to make it. And they're not going to get there if their parents don't have the help either. So whatever it takes, and as long as God will give me breath, I want to serve. We do, I don't know if you're familiar with the Man Up in Harlem prayer walks that we do every Thursday morning, 6 in the morning. We're walking for like the last 9 years. It started as a result In Harlem, it started as a result of 4 homicides that took place in the Polo Ground in a 30-day period. Some people never have a homicide in their whole county. 4 people died at different intervals in the Polo Grounds in 2008. We had been doing the prayer walk in the Bronx, in the South Bronx, Bronx River Housing, and we saw a drastic change. I got a call from the police commissioner that says the crime statistics dropped and they were going down, and he wanted to have a conversation with me in the Polo Ground. So that's when we realized that things were happening. But now, I don't want you to think that we did something marvelous. It is the power of God and the belief in encouraging people to have hope and to do better. Have we annihilated everything? No, there's always going to be something. But I like something that Sharpton said this morning. If we are going to be faith leaders, and if we call ourselves people of faith, then what are you doing? Do you have clean hands and dirty heart, or dirty hearts and clean hand? Which one is it? But we have to serve, and we have to serve. And I hope I didn't misquote you, Rev, but I think the people got the principle. I saw you this morning at the mayor's breakfast, and we have to give. And when people say, "Oh man, Al, look how far you've come," I'm not here because I did it in a vacuum by myself. And I hope their children and these people believe that they too can do something as well. Let your life be a living testimony. So in 2016, the young lady that's here is my chief of staff. She said, I thought you said you was going to train to walk to Chicago. I said, I am. She said, well, it's March. When are you going to start? So she was basically calling me out. And so we started walking. And I prepared myself. August 7th, I began my walk to the south side of Chicago. 780 miles or more, I arrived in Chicago on the 6th of September. And it was a walk for peace. It was a prayer walk to bring awareness that we need to look at life differently, and how we resolve our conflicts. That's what we have to do. But I want to see the grandchildren and the children of those that are here right now being able to stay here and live comfortably and affording what's here. Did you hear about the fire on 144th in November? And the building is demolished. I think the 6th floor fell down to the 4th floor. The roof collapsed. And I was out there, and I've been in touch with some of the residents there. And there are people that are eking out a living, but there are also people that were living in that building that were paying over $4,000 a month. Rent. They didn't own it. And I was just like, are you kidding me? In that building? So that's what's happening. And they broke it up with 3 young ladies. But to your point, that's affordable. $2,000 a month is affordable when you're looking at the Upper West Side or the Upper East Side, and you have to spend $1 million to get a studio or better. So now I can come up here and get one for $400,000. That's affordable. 15, 20 years ago, we say affordable. It was like, yeah, we need affordable housing. We want affordable housing. And that word affordable has it's taken on different connotations depending on who you're talking about and what the conversation is. So social justice has to be at the forefront. Esplanade Gardens is an institution. The folks that are here, most of them have been here since they turned the first door and opened it in 68, 69, and they're quite elderly, but they've got grandchildren, they got nieces and nephews, and more people are moving in. And it's a great place to live. And I want to see them have the same opportunities that their grandparents had and that I've had to be able to stay in this community and do whatever they want to do and not have to be run out or moved out because they can't afford the rent. So I've got to do some real work to save not only my apartment, my neighbors, but our communities.